Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Martino, Puccio, Mike Phillips alongside you guys. Took a little bit of an absence last week, so we apologize for that. But with that, not much actually happened with the Mets, Mike. But as far as you guys can tell, with the lower third over here, Mark Vientos of the Pirates is a huge-ish rumor that's been floated out there. But first, Mike, how you doing?
They're pretty good. It was nice. Like, yes, you apologize for last week. A little under the weather. There was a lot. There was definitely some sort of bugs going around in here, but there were a lot of nothing happening in baseball right now, aside from like one or two free agent signings. So it was a good time to not be around.
Correct. Yeah. Realistically, the only big signing was Framber Valdez to the Detroit Tigers, which is huge cover for the eventual departure of Tariq School. But speaking of, departures, a rumor popped up, and I say rumor strongly here because of the source that had tweeted this out. And it also involves Brett Beatty. Shouldn't exclude him from this. But Mark Vientos to the Pirates. A lot has been made, Mike, about Vientos' future with the Mets, considering the options that he has left. He can't go back to the minor leagues. He's a DFA candidate if that were to be the case. So a lot of speculation has grown over time about Vientos potentially leaving via trade. Whereas if you fall under my belief that he should be the DH up until, say, the trade deadline, or if a trade were to materialize later on in the season, package him because of his years of control. This stuff involves the Pirates because they had missed out on potential signings. Eugenio Suarez is one of those that went to the Cincinnati Reds, could have been on the Pirates' radar, but they need bats. I think everybody knows that they're lacking that, especially when their pitching is so great. What do you make of this? I don't think this is a match between the two franchises, Mike, when it comes to what teams are able to give and what the Mets would want and the value of Vientos. Does this make any sense to you?
I think it makes sense for the Pirates to want Mark Vientos. I just don't know what they can offer the Mets for Mark Vientos because, like, the Mets don't need starting pitching right now. The Pirates have basically that to offer in
Well, the
spades.
starting pitching that they would offer the Mets, right?
Yeah, it's like we don't need. Like I said, I've been on record in multiple places. The Mets don't need more number three starters. They have plenty of those.
You're
Like,
adamant about it, yeah.
this is not Mitch. Like, this is not a Mitch Keller, Mark Vientos situation happening here. Like you're not gonna. I don't think they give you Jerry Jones or Grant Ashcraft for
Bubba Chandler got floated by people, which was silly.
there's no way. There's no way Bubba Chandler's in this. You're looking at probably maybe Ashcraft or Jared Jones. It would be something you can float around. I think the Pirates would do that. I think it's too much of an overpay. Are you trading Mark Vientos for a bullpen arm? Probably not at this juncture of the season. You might as well just see what you have in him. Like, I see the Pirates wanting him. I just don't see where the match is made.
Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense. I think Mitch Keller at this point in time, to what you said, why trade for somebody like that? I understand his contract is relatively fair, but then the Mets would just go sign a Chris Bassett or someone like that. And I know that's someone that you kind of been against adding, and I understand. Yeah, this kind of reeks. And even if we didn't want to talk about Vientos to the Pirates, even the Brett Beatty side of things, Beatty is way too versatile for the Mets at this point in time to actually just give up for a Mitch Keller in this. And again, this really comes from and stems from, hey, the Pirates could use hitters. The Mets have some
Extras.
decent hitters, a little bit of a clog, if you will, right? Because if Polanco moves to the DH position, if Ryan Clifford keeps evolving as a first baseman, or, they add whoever else to the first base spot and then Polanco goes to DH, you could see that kind of going away for Vientos. But for me, based off of David Stern's comments in the winter and everything else that we've kind of seen from Vientos over the past two seasons, I think they're going to stick with him and give him an opportunity. They didn't really shy away from Brett Beatty last season when Beatty really didn't show that much overall, Mike, especially, kind of with the hype that was brought up with him as a top prospect for quite some time. And, a lot of people were against starting Brett Beatty last year. I was one of those people. They kind of had, I guess you could say a competition for third base, despite the fact that Beatty was much better defensively. David Stearns has shown willingness to let players develop and give them time. I think ultimately what's going to happen with Vientos is he's going to be given the opportunity to DH quite often, unless, there's some splits where they want Polanco DHing and whoever else goes to first. I think Vientos is going to get a real shot here for at least the first 2 months of the season. Do you see the same?
I think he'll get a chance to play because I think, like, if you have him here, like, there's no point in him being on the bench. You got to play the guy to do this year. And I know the Pirates want Brett Baty too, but if you look at Brett Baty's situation for the Mets here, like there is a possibility. I don't know how strong it is, but there is a chance, that like at this point, 12 months from now, Bo Bichette's on a different team. You need a third baseman, which Brett Baty could slot right back in. So I don't think the Mets are going to give that up yet.
Yeah, and we mentioned on last episode about Jacob Reimer probably being a possible destination for the future. I actually think Beatty is more likely to be a future second baseman 2 years from now. I think Simeon could be on the outs. And sure, if Bo Bichette has a great season, wants to go into free agency again, renegotiate his deal. But I kind of bring it up, and I agree with some people who also state this. If Bichette has a great year, the Mets are likely to go and try and re-sign him, maybe for more years. I don't truly see it as like a Pete Alonso situation unless he's really that bad at third base, right, Mike? Where it's like, okay, you're not good enough there. And relative to his age, too, he's a couple years younger than what Alonso would have been, on the free agent market. And I think their bats would age differently, but I totally understand like the contingency when it comes to Brett Baty at third. But yeah, I think you and I and almost everyone else, the second that they read this rumor, doesn't really make much sense on the Mets side of things, considering how they value Baty and Vientos at this point in time. I just don't see it, right? And if any pitcher was on the Pittsburgh Pirates that the Mets would want, it's the guy that is clearly not available, and Paul Skeens. So I don't see, and or even if it were to be Jones, I don't see them making that move, especially with the plethora of young pitching that the Mets do have, which we'll get into a little bit later. And ultimately bringing up the bigger question here: are the Mets done adding to the major league team? I think so. On a larger scale, yeah, you might see some minor league deals with some past Mets like Griffin Canning. I don't think Bassett would be that. I think Bassett will probably get a major league deal. But if the Mets were to add anything to their major league roster, Mike, where would it be?
I think the only thing you're looking at adding maybe is a right-handed hitting outfielder who can maybe cover you if you want to shield Carson Bench from tough lefties, or if Brett Baty's out there and you don't have Brett Baty playing against tough lefties. That could be Starling Marte. That could be Austin Slater. It could be somebody in that bucket here, like somebody who's not knows they're not going to play every day, just wants to get reps on a good team. Like I don't think you're adding more to the rotation of the bullpen. I think you have enough there. I think they have enough infielders, and we know that Acuna is gone and Mauricio is going down AAA to start the season, all likelihood. So they have like, I think that's the only area you can say, okay, maybe they add one outfielder here. But I think they're going to look at what they have in camp first before they go down that road.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because virtually all the positions on the diamond are locked up, right? You pretty much have your entire infield, even if you're platooning in left and first on occasion and even DH. I don't really see how the Mets could add or upgrade significantly in those spots. I think Marte is a decent shout, but it feels like he'd be more of a DH bat too, right? Like because of his limited mobility in left field, are the Mets going to take a hit there? Because he really fell off a cliff. We knew that they moved him over to right field and they thought he would have aged better than he did, and he really kind of fell off a plateau, like truthfully. And that's a worrying sign. But he did hit well as a DH when given proper rest. We know the relationship with Juan Soto, so I think that's a really good shout there. I just wonder how much they break up left-handed hitters facing lefties this season, right? You mentioned protecting Carson Bench. Does Baty get a little bit more leeway against lefties this year, you think?
Hard to tell because like it's one of those things where like they are also last year they showed they love the platoon advantage. And I think they will
Right.
try and do it for their younger guys who they don't know if they can do it yet or not. I think like especially you deal with a tougher lefty, like if they're running into Chris Sale, I don't think you're gonna see Brett Baty in the starting lineup. I don't think you're gonna see like Bench in the lineup against somebody like that. I don't think you
Yeah.
see it against Christopher Sanchez or Jesus
Right.
Lazar. I think like those are spots where you want to say, okay, like we'll go with Starling Marte out there, or we'll go with Austin Slater, or whoever the guy is, to play left field and hit like eighth in the lineup that day.
Do you see a chance? Because Robert hits lefties very well, that Tyrone Taylor slots back into the left field position.
Could,
I mean,
that could happen.
Taylor's such a bad hitter that it really would be damning if he would be out there left.
I think it's a possibility. It's like I had to look up what he did against lefties last year, Tyrone Taylor, because like his defense is so good that like
It
essentially
really
a lot of guys who can hit lefties, whether like a couple of switch hitters at the top with Lindor and Polanco, Bichette's righty, Soto is Soto. Like the only guys you're looking at here, like, is it you're sitting Beatty, you're sitting Benj. Like, I think they'd be okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be shocked if they give, an opportunity to a Beatty to try and hit some lefties and then use Tyrone as a later game replacement at that position. Um, yeah, it's just kind of up in the air for me with that. I think ultimately I would like to see them try and add a Bassett. That's just me, and I'm a very much paranoid fan of pitching. When it comes to health, we saw how they dissolved last year. I wouldn't rule out something, and I know you mentioned this to me, and I knew it in the back of my head with the Jose Quintana spot. But say unfortunately a pitcher does go down in spring training. Do they pounce on that? It's more than likely that a Griffin Canning would be coming back for the Mets. He would also be taking his time because when he tears Achilles sometime in June, right, or late May.
It was like
So
late.
yeah. So it was quite some time now. So we'll see how he bounces back. Obviously, he was starting to turn into a pumpkin. It was about to turn midnight for him. But yeah, I think those are the kind of smaller moves that you will see that the Mets will have in terms of depth for the rest of the offseason. I don't anticipate too much. And this is regarding the major league level, by the way, not the minor league deals that we could foresee for the future. And speaking of the minor leagues, Michael, Jonah Tong starting off in AAA. This was pretty much something that we all knew. The reason why Tong really came up last season wasn't just because of how dominant he was in the minor leagues. He had a short stint in AAA, as we all knew. It was because the Mets pitching at the major league level was so bad that they needed somebody. So they started that clock. We get that. But I think it was a really good scope and learning experience for a Jonah Tong to see what he needs to work on, predominantly breaking pitches, Mike, for major league players to whiff on. That was something that is really going to be a focal point of his development and why he's going to be starting at AAA this year.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean I've seen the comps that people have made. Like this is kind of like what the Brewers did with Peralta. And remember, Peralta came up; he was fastball Freddy, where he was just not living on the fastball and one off-speed pitch. And they had to use him in the bullpen early. He was a back rotation. It took him a bit to develop those off-speed pitches. And Jonah Tong can start in AAA. He only made 2 starts there before he came up because that's a very limited sample size for somebody as young as he is. Like they love his upside. I think the thing with Jonah Tong is I think you let him go down there. Let him, start every 5th day, maybe every 6th day if you're worried about like innings and whatnot. Christian Scott is down there too as well. So keep an eye on those guys, like see what he can do. And then like if somebody gets hurt, you can come up for a few weeks and then go back down if he's not hasn't earned it. I think that's the way you play it.
Yeah, I really think there's just so many different pitchers, and a player like him, his release point is so unique and precise that he really needs to work on those breaking pitches. Because we hear Nolan McLean literally on record say Jonah Tong has the best fastball I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And sure, he's playing in the minor leagues. We don't know how many pitchers he really kind of deals with, but that's high praise for a really talented guy like Nolan. I think the upside with Jonah Tong is really mesmerizing for a lot of fans. We see him involved in tons of trade talks and rumors this offseason and how he was deemed untouchable. And that says a lot with the Mets considering how they viewed Brandon Sproat and how Sproat was viewed in top 100 lists. Tong had numbers in the minor leagues last year, Mike. You knew this, not only for the Mets system, across all of minor league baseball as one of the best minor league pitchers. So what do you think the Mets are probably going to need to see? I don't even think it's necessarily like low ERA, low whip, and all that kind of stuff. And sure, that matters. But I think ultimately it's how many whiffs are you getting with your secondary pitches, your slider, your curveball, all that kind of stuff. Because ultimately, even if the numbers are like, oh, well, players are touching and hitting it a little bit, but there's more whiffs, I think Tong will come up. I actually don't see him being up with the New York Mets before Memorial Day. I think something is going to have to go wrong for the Mets, which you could never really rule out if he were to make his comeback to the team. I truly don't see him being back in Queens before the summer.
Yeah, I mean, last year, look up, he struck about 179 batters, 113 2/3 minor league innings, which is ridiculous if you look at that. And I think this is one of those things where like it's gonna be annoying to like the fans and the Twitter minor league experts who are like watching this and watching that. This is not gonna be something I think you're gonna look at the box score and say, oh, he's ready. Like I think you're gonna is the other thing that the scouts and the player and the like like minor league staff down there going to be watching him, and the pitching guys are watching and saying like, how is this pitch working? Like, how are hitters adapting to it? Is he commanding it? I don't think that's something you can just look at a box score and find. It's something that you're going to have to like, track him over multiple starts and see, does he have this pitch yet? Is it something we have to junk? Do you have to modify? I think it's going to take a little bit before you find that thing where you say, okay, like he's got enough stuff where he can be like a front end big league starter.
Yeah, and I think that's the really big issue. Not issue, I would say. The cause for concern is I think the hype with Tong is so bizarre in a way that people feel like he's supposed to be an ace instead of trusting the process of him developing, because we see how impactful Nolan McLean is the second that he gets called up, right? You're like, okay, he's clearly great. With Tong and his numbers in AAA and how we saw it not translate very well at the major league level, he got tagged up in Cincinnati, started off well against Miami, and they tagged him up a little bit, but they scored so many runs that night in his debut, it really didn't matter. I think that's where you're right. Like, take your time. This is okay. We have plenty of pitchers, and we're going to talk about some that also popped up on this list for the top 100 that, the Mets are okay with developing. David Stearns is a mastermind when it comes to this stuff. Their best pitcher on their roster was traded for and developed by David Stearns. So he knows what he's doing with this. We see the model in Milwaukee. It also wouldn't surprise me if he actually came up into the bullpen and kind of do what we've seen recently, and especially with someone like Christian Scott as well. I really do see him being in the bullpen. So ultimately, Jonah, Tong starting in AAA makes a ton of sense. Ronnie Mauricio is the same, and Christian Scott. I don't really foresee any of these younger players going to AAA. Obviously, Carson Bench could definitely start out there, but it seems pretty adamant that the Mets are like, you get your opportunity in AAA to do well. In spring training to do well. We'll see what happens there. I'm not truly sure about how they're going to view that with, like, say he tears it up, right? Do they send him down to AAA? I don't think so. I'm not even sure if he does mediocre that they would send him down to AAA. I think they just want to see the process of him taking pitches well, putting the barrel on the ball, and continuing those underlying metrics that were actually positive in AAA, despite the output not necessarily being there. So any other players that you see that could be headed to AAA that are kind of on the fringe of making the roster out of spring?
I think you got the guys pretty much. I think like
Right.
all the other guys, I think they're like are going to be going up from AA to AAA, not the other way around. So
Yeah. So heading to the sticking on the minor leagues here with the New York Mets. Baseball's Prospectus comes out with their top 101 list. And guess what, Mike? There's a lot of New York Mets after the fact that we were told they traded away too many prospects from the trade deadline up until now. And the Mets have purged the farm. The Mets have 7 prospects in the top 101. We'll read off the list for you here. Nolan McLean at number 4 overall. Carson Bench at number 10. Jonah Tong at 23. AJ Ewing, there he is, number 38. Jacob Reimer at 70. Ryan Clifford at 86. And Will Watson making a pretty big jump. He's not the biggest. That's AJ Ewing. And Watson coming in at 96 to round out that list. It is a list. We've heard about plenty of these pitchers and hitters, and we're not really surprised by much of this. AJ Ewing, very much beloved on this list compared to a lot of other places. We know our good friend Will thinks he's Bigfoot. Ewing is like, Mike, he's not just like getting a lot of respect from baseball lists. He's beloved in manners. We know about the steal numbers at the minor leagues, making plenty of contact as well. Possible future center fielder for the Mets if Luis Robert doesn't work out. What do you make of this top 7 list? I don't think the top 3 is of any surprise to anyone that's been paying attention to the Mets minor league system, but the rest is intriguing, I would say.
very intriguing. I mean, there's some guys on here like you were not aware. I mean, like MLB.com, look at their list at the end of last year. They had Reimer ranked ahead of AJ Ewing. So that tells you like some places are higher on Ewing here. Will Watson
Right.
is the interesting one because he's a guy who, he's not really mentioned in that next tier of guys. Is you're like Jack Wenninger, Jonathan Santucci, those are the 2 main ones. Like Watson's a guy they only drafted a couple of years ago into the 7th round of 2024. And like there is some reliever risk there, but like I do think like he's got the kind of like fastball. We got 3 good pitches he could work with and potentially like get up to the big leagues in a year or two.
Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate thing, though, that you mentioned with the Santucci's and Wenigers, who are really strong prospects in the Mets system that are not cracking the top 10. And then we have Watson, who really, when we're talking about those tiers of pitchers, just like you mentioned, he's not really somebody that they were kind of drooling over in terms of the public. Mets people that are obsessed with their prospects, kind of not foaming at the mouth about Will Watson, but they're like, look out, that's a name for a guy that could potentially surge in 2026. There's some upside there. Reimer, not surprising at all for me at number 70. We know how much people love his bat. There are zero questions about his bat, and a lot of people think he'll translate very well. However, it's the defense there. If he's able to shore that up. And again, when you have Bo Bichette, when you have Brett Beatty, and even Ronnie Mauricio to an extent blocking him. We'll see where Mauricio plugs and plays. He's been rumored to go all over the diamond. We'll see second base, first base. But yeah, Reimer, that's not a surprise to me. Ryan Clifford at 86 here. I actually think Clifford has so much upside. Cutting down on the strikeouts, ton of power, still really young as well. He had 29 home runs at the minor league level last year, played at 2 different levels, really showing promising signs. I think the number one thing for him was strikeouts, Mike. We saw a huge cut down there, still just at 86. I think Clifford is a prospect that makes sense for him, but in terms of upside, you could argue he has more upside than half the list here. Do you disagree or agree?
Yeah, in terms of just pure power, like I feel like Met fans who are going to miss Pete Alonso, I think that's the guy they have in mind, sort of take that first base like power slot like within a year or two, which is why Polanco getting 2 years because they think that Ryan Clifford will be ready by the end of 27 to be the first baseman for the Mets.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even be shocked if things go differently with Vientos, like we were just talking about earlier, and then Polanco switch over to DH if he's kind of shaky and Clifford makes huge jumps at the AAA level. I wouldn't even be so shocked if you see Ryan Clifford field at first base for the New York Mets and Queens this year. But that's much later on in the season, and that's just a possible path if things go very well for him. I would say the AJ Ewing stuff, really interesting to me. It's a huge jump. Number 38 overall when he really wasn't in top 100s last year. We know about the speed. We know about the contact. A different type of profile than we're sort of used to seeing for the New York Mets overall. He really seems like this versatile, modern-day major league athlete that's able to kind of play all over the diamond, has plus speed. We'll see how his glove plays as well, but the bat is big on contact. AJ Ewing, to you, is this a guy again that we could be seeing up in 2027 or potentially debut later in 2026?
I think this is a guy you're going to see probably. Like, it wouldn't shock me like if they're in the postseason mix late in the year that he's the September call up and they use him off the bench as like a pinch running type of thing, just how fast he is, and like he's still
Like
70.
Acuna kind of was in 2024.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like he had 70 stolen bases in the minors last year, which that doesn't grow on trees. There's somebody who can do that much here. And a fun fact for the for the audience here on this one, like AJ Ewing got into the Mets with the comp pick they got for losing Jacob deGrom to Texas.
Hey, I mean, wouldn't that be great? It's not David Wright, Mike Hampton 2.0, but that would be pretty damn good. That's to me is the most fascinating one because we talk about the long-term future of the Mets, right? And how Juan Soto will be playing in right field. If these players number 2 and 4 on the list, and Carson Bench and AJ Ewing, end up carving themselves a spot in center field and left field for the Mets, and they kind of live up to this hype. And again, it's really difficult with prospects. Rarely do you see major league teams produce that many players that could, plug and play at premier positions, especially in center field with Ewing. That's massive. And especially for someone like Benj, who could just move over to that center field spot. And we know he has the capability of playing in center. He's a really good athlete. But moving over to left, making things so much easier for him. Because then, say like someone like Benj actually does exceed expectations, not only just as a hitter, as an overall player. He would project as an above average defensive left fielder, would he not? And that would be tremendous for them because you don't really have to worry so much about what Brett Beatty can do. I think the Mets would just have so much versatility all over the diamond, which is something that they have not had for years. And it's a huge mark of what David Stearns has been trying to do this offseason. Um, I mean, your kind of thoughts on Nolan McLean and Carson Benj there. I mean, it pretty much seems like Nolan is across the board one of the most revered Mets prospects that I can remember in quite some time. And you were there at his debut. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I was.
So do you view Nolan McLean at that? Because we're already starting to see the Cam Schlittler comparisons and who's better, who's not. Just like we saw years ago with DeGrom and maybe Severino, it was. I mean, Nolan's kind of got that. And 4, you can argue to some people, is that kind of low? But then again, I know the kid in Pittsburgh is sensational. So, Nolan McLean, number 4, is he this guy who's going to be competing for Cy Young awards in your mind?
I think he's definitely in the conversation. I mean, he's already pitching for USA in the WBC, which is pretty nuts for his age, considering like that. Look at the staff they have. It's not like a watered down USA staff.
Right.
You have Tarek Skubal, Paul Skeens on that staff, and like, yes, McLean's gonna probably work out of the bullpen for the USA team a bit, but like the fact that he's on that list is very impressive. And you look at Nolan McLean, like this amount of stuff he can throw, and like the fact he got up in these big spots. Remember, he was the first guy up in the pennant race last year, and he was like, you came down the season where like you're looking at this, and they had him lined up for game 1 of a wild card series that they got there. They said like he's the one guy we could count on to start for, which is nuts for a kid who was like basically a full-time pitcher for like the first time a year and a half ago, because he was a two-way guy before that.
Correct. Yeah. Cowboy Otani was his nickname at the minor league level, coming out of Oklahoma State, where he was also playing with Carson Bench. I think that the thing with McLean is how much of a sophomore slump catches up to him. Do pitchers adjust? But it's really hard to adjust when I think I can't speak on generational spin rate, but this guy has elite spin rate for his age. Because if anybody tunes into Pitching Ninja and he shows us side by side of how difficult it is to deal with fastballs and then whatever the hell he throws, because it's hard to define the kind of magic that he pulls off. That's the thing with McLean. It's just some of the best breaking pitches that you've ever seen for a youngster come out. And I'm not even trying to exaggerate with this. This is just being purely objective. McLean just has it when it comes to the secondary stuff. Fastballs will always be fastballs at the major league level. They're going to be tough to hit, anything 95 or above, right? It's kind of tough to say competing for Cy Youngs when a guy like Paul Skeens exists and the Yamamotos of the world and Christopher Sanchez's. But man, it just really feels like this is the best starting pitcher that they've produced since the DeGrom and Wheeler. Like, so at least over a decade, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's great videos in terms of like Nolan McLean. You watch, I mean, the pitching ninja account's a great one, like where they'll show you like him throwing 2 pitches. They look exactly the same, and then one spins all the way to the left, one spins all the way to the right. Like, what are you gonna do with that?
Exactly. And once he's able to kind of, I guess pick apart pitchers at the level and just getting more comfortability, I just thought he was so good down the stretch. And, it was one of those situations where it was kind of sink or swim for a lot of the pitchers that came up. And yeah, sure, there was that angle of you can't do a lot worse than what we have here. But they were relying on him, as you mentioned, to be their ace down the stretch of a postseason hunt where this team is collapsing. Almost like the margin for error, even for a kid like that, was small. And I thought he came out on the other side. He looked great, easily the best of the 3 rookies that we saw, but was definitely more, developed over time. So I would say that Nolan McLean is clearly the best prospect on there. Carson Bench, it does feel like to me with Bench, a lot of people kind of have these doubts because of the numbers that were produced at the AAA level. A lot of people huge into the minor leagues think his underlying metrics are still really strong. And I think that's why David Stearns and other people with the Mets organization aren't necessarily worried. But man, there is a lot of hype around him too, and what he's capable of doing. How are you viewing Carson Bench this year for the Mets? I think it just reminds me of, I don't want to say David Wright because I'm not comparing like the levels there, but it just really seems like the or even Alonso to an extent, where it really feels like the organization knows and believes this kid is good enough to making it out of spring. Do you agree with that?
This to me feels like more Conforto-ish to me in terms of like
Okay.
the kind of player that they think he can be. I think a thing that's helpful for them is that they have such a stacked like lineup now that you can look at Carson Bench and say, okay, you don't have to save us like some of the other guys. But I think that was part of why Ahmed Rosario and Don Smith struggled because they were kind of said, okay, you guys are the top prospects in baseball, maybe over heights, but save us. Like you're gonna be our future superstars. And now Carson Bench come up like and hit ninth in the Met lineup behind a bunch of proven veterans and have guys on base to hit to potentially drive in runs and work his way up the line as opposed to like being asked to like come in and hit three right away. Like that's something I think that will help him.
Yeah, I just think the depth, as you mentioned, is huge. We've seen a couple of rookies in the mix, kind of develop. So there's going to be guys that he's played with too. I
Yep.
think that's an important thing. Easing these rookies in, or younger players, I should say, has done is one of the more underrated aspects, I would say, under this Carlos Mendoza era and David Stearns, because again, they're not throwing them in the deep end quite often, right? They only did that unless they had to, like like applying to Benj, sorry, not Benj, Tong, McLean, and then Sprout, who eventually ended up leaving. They did it when they felt it was necessary or when guys are ready. I just think that the way they view Benj speaks very highly about that because they wouldn't be putting him in a position to make the team out of camp. And I know this is a philosophical thing that differs from the previous regimes, but I think that's just a telling sign for me that David Stearns is willing to say, okay, we had a terrible end to last season. We did not do that great in certain positions. And you're coming in to also replace a fan favorite in that spot. Brandon Nimmo is still beloved by Mets fans for the most part. So to come in and be put in that spot, you know, I think that's added pressure for him. And I'm not saying that's like the whole perception of the Mets fan base. I just think that, if you kind of get off to a rough start, I don't think it's kind of something easy to back from. I know that's poorly worded, but what I'm trying to get at is there's a contingency of Mets fans that are kind of chomping at the bit for one of these moves to go poorly at first base or left field, where one of their fan favorites was traded away or let go. So I just think that aspect of it does matter a little bit. I'm just curious to see how he comes out on the other side. I'm just on the fence about Benj. I think he could be really great or just meh. The Benj upside is serious. I really do think this could be their best developed outfielder since Conforto and maybe even Nimmo. I really do think that upside is there. There's just so many tools that scream to you that this player can kind of do it all, and I just hope it turns out that way because if the Mets are able to prove to themselves under this Stearns regime that they're able to produce hitters at this level, I'm never going to question the New York Mets and their development of pitchers. That's just always going to be a thing. They're always going to be capable of it. Hitters is truly where it lies. If David Stearns is able to start producing hitters from this farm system, then I think tons of fans should get elated and excited about this. That's just a me thing.
Yeah.
All right. So, any other final topics or players that you want to get into before we head out of here?
I think my last point would just be again the idea that you and I've had this debate off the air about like, do they need to sign a Chris Bassett
Mm,
or like another like type of
a
rotation
Canning.
pitcher? Like, yeah, Canning I think is a different situation, but
You're saying
Griffin
okay.
Canning I think would be a Miley deal, but I don't think Griffin Canning should come here if he's trying to give himself the best chance to extend his career because like he's fighting a huge battle just to get starts. Whereas like
Right.
if Griffin Canning wants to go to like the White Sox or the Cardinals or something like that, where like he has a more clear path to getting big league starts. I think that's probably what he should do at this
Right.
stage of his career. Whereas, like, I feel like if you're trying to, in a situation where you're basically looking at breaking camp with six starters, everybody's healthy
Hmm.
with because you're not going to make Sean Manaea a long man right out of the gate because the $25 million salaries they get every chance to start. You're looking at those guys, Christian Scott and Jonah Tong down in AAA at the starters here. Like you don't need another guy to occupy a spot, like just to have a guy there. I think you're looking for like somebody on a minor league deal, sure, but like I'm not getting on a guarantee contract with another pitcher.
It's interesting now because of what the contract is for Framber Valdez, and I think you raise a fair point. But just if stuff lingers and lingers, and I see, no, I'm not saying I see it, but there's risk for potential injuries like any team. I wouldn't completely rule out the Bassett one. I totally get your angle for that. Even the Zach Gallons of the world, I'm curious to see where he lands. Um, Feels more like American League at this point. I also think like Gallon has like a number two upside. I'm not sure if you disagree with that or not. He was poor in Arizona last year, and I know it's just fantasy baseball, but I had him on my team, and he was pretty infuriating for the most part. But the second half of the year, and I know you mentioned this, but you and I both talked about this, but our good friend Will wasn't like, I'm not buying in to the August and September being good for him. Even a Gallon, would you even like kind of ponder or no?
No, because of the draft pick attachment here, and I don't think
Right.
they need like that kind of starter right now. They have their top guy. You think McLean can be your two guy. You have enough threes to make your things work. And like remember last year when they had Mania and Montas got hurt within like a week of each other, and the Mets didn't add to the gap to the group. Like I don't see them doing it here.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, but also I mean that was a very big lesson for David Stearns though, because he even also talked about that publicly. I know he said it about the trade deadline, but he said he wished he was more aggressive on the starting pitching development. But the only thing that I will defend him for in regards to the starting pitching was it was historically like unfortunate the
Yeah,
amount of injuries that they had. Like again, it's they couldn't get any, and I know pitching is different in innings and how far pitchers go, but they literally couldn't get someone else to string along 6 innings outside
yeah.
of David Peterson for a couple months. That the likelihood of that repeating, and I knock on the wood on my desk here on purpose because that's highly unlikely to happen again. But I think you raised a great point with that when it came to Jose Quintana as well. So we're going to wrap it up there. Not much to talk about. Pitchers and catchers reporting very soon. We're going to have spring training games happening as well. Won't have the normal spring training because of the World Baseball Classic this year. But Mike Phillips, everybody can go and follow you at mphillips331 on social media and some of the stuff that you could let them know that you discuss on your podcast, Just End the Suffering and Sky Guys.
Yeah, so that's gonna be some fun stuff here. This week over on Just on the Suffering, we got ready for the Super Bowl. I had pro football guru Russell Baxter on. We cover all the big storylines of the game. We have Super Bowl betting guide here with Tom McKee of the Sorry Interrupt podcast. And our friend, the great Alan Austin, actually stopped by. He talked Traders 4, a midseason update with Alan.
You got oh my! It's so funny having worked at Peacock to see the amount of people that are obsessed with the pro. Traders was a huge thing. They had that in the office. They had their own version
Yeah,
of Traders. I'm not sure if you mentioned it.
Traders is the thing. Like literally, like this is the show people talk about now these days.
They do that in Love Island. Love Island is not something I advise people to watch, but Traders is definitely more entertaining and funny. But yes, stay tuned for more information regarding the both of us when it comes to baseball and content for this coming season. So that will be exciting. So be sure to like every single clip that we post here, and especially this podcast. Like it up, comment, go and subscribe to all of Mike's stuff. It's always great work. One of the hardest workers around. The consistency is there, so that should be rewarded with you guys. And again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Close to 200 subscribers at Martino Puccio everywhere. You can follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. So greatly appreciative of that. So we will be back hopefully next week to talk more New York Mets. And until then, you guys take care and enjoy the winter weather.